What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Hawks Film Room podcast, hosted by myself, David, also known as DLE43 on all platforms. Please make sure you like, subscribing, commenting on the podcast, sharing it, whatever it may be. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Typically, we break down games with some film, talk about the playstyle tendencies, but the Hawks made some pretty major trades. They ended up shipping out DeAndre Hunter and Bogdan Bogdanovic for packages that have included Caris Levert, Georges Niang, Terrence Mann, and then now Wave Bones Highland. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on the DeAndre Hunter transaction. And I have the utmost pleasure of introducing Precision, the face of Cavs Twitter, and he's going to help walk us through some of the implications of this trade. He's going to help us talk to us about Georges Niang, Caris Levert, what they can bring for the Hawks, and then we'll talk about it, what DeAndre Hunter can bring to the Cavs as well. So welcome, bro.
Thank you for having me, man, and I appreciate the invite.
Of course, of course. So I really just want to get and start off with, what was your initial reaction when you saw that trade notification come across your screen?
I was ecstatic. We've been, the Hunter trade has been rumored for the past couple of days, so it became kind of restless. Only an hour and a half trade before the deadline. Past couple of years, our team has never made a trade deadline trade, so I was doubting it was even going to happen, or if it was just rumors. I was in the middle of the class. I get the Shams noti. I check it. I'm checking every single one, and then I'm like, wow. Like I'm like happy we got a wing. But then I checked the details. And I'm surprised we didn't get our first or Jalen Tyson, who was our biggest young asset. So I was ecstatic, man.
Yeah. So for those who maybe haven't heard the full details of the trade, the Hawks sent out DeAndre Hunter. In return, they got Caris Levert, Georges Niang, 3 second-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. Now, the way the swaps work is maybe a little confusing. It's essentially a swap for a swap. So Cleveland had Utah's pick swaps, but now we have Cleveland's right to swap, but we also don't own our first. So San Antonio has a right to swap. So essentially, these are probably going to be late first. Like, it'd have to be a very low percentage outcome for the Hawks to get any sort of value out of these swaps outside of just not getting like a late first. So the first from pick compensation package, like you said, Precision, not getting a first, not getting Jalen Tyson wasn't great. From my perspective, I went into a meeting right when the trade happened, but like I wanted Jalen Tyson or first. That was what I was looking for. They just dropped a report that said that the Hawks were looking for both, and then from that point on, like negotiations happened, and I still think like the Hawks in their head had their mind of like, okay, DeAndre Hunter's, we don't believe that he's going to be this type of player consistently over the course of a season. And we also feel like we're asking too much of him within our system. Let's try and capitalize on his value when it's high. And so the overall package return, it could have been better in theory, but I think Cleveland was smart with the moves they had. You guys don't have a ton of first round picks. You did have to give up some to Utah, and then Jalen Tyson is like you said, your youngest asset. So I know we talked a little bit about like the Cam Johnson versus DeAndre Hunter. Where were you leaning on that? And you said you would have given up more for Cam, right?
I would have given up more for Cam because I believe that Cam has better percentages across the board, especially as a playmaker. It was talked about on the Ultimate Cleveland show, but they said that Cam Johnson has a higher driving kick rate than Garland and Mitchell, which, considering
Mm,
how great of playmakers they are, that is ridiculous. So I
mm.
was like, this guy would fit perfect in our system. And then in Phoenix, he was a really good defender. His on-off metrics were really good over there. So I was thinking kind of like a Mikal Bridges situation. But I wasn't
Yeah,
opposed to Hunter.
that's
I just didn't want to give up as much as I would for Cam Johnson.
got you. Yeah, and that definitely makes sense. The Hawks ended up putting out 4 second round picks, including the Bogey deal and the Cody Zeller salary dump. So we were net negative of 1 second round pick, but we did gain a 27, a 29, and a 31 from Cleveland. Now I want to talk about your perspective on the guys who are coming for Atlanta, right? So up on the screen in a second, I'm going to display some of Caris Levert's numbers in particular because I think he's the one who's has the most interest from Cavs fans. I mean, from Hawks fans. I think a lot of them remember what he did in Brooklyn. What did you think about this particular season from him? What growth have you seen from him during his time as a Cav? And just kind of like, what do you think Hawks fans can expect from him?
I'm higher on Caris Levert than most Cavs fans. I want to preface that before I say that. I thought he was going to have one of his better years coming into the year because he got his former coach in Kenny Atkinson, and he
Mhm.
was already kind of transitioning from his ball dominant role that he was in Indy. I believe he's a really good playmaker and probably the most underrated bench playmaker in the league. He's a
Mm.
really good interior passer, and he's a great catch and shooter as well. Um, his finishing is honestly abysmal. It was a lot worse in past years, which is crazy to say. But he's such a good passer that it kind of like hot masks it in a way. And his particularly like his inconsistency, which used to be one of his bigger weaknesses, has gotten a lot better. Now recently it's been kind of rough, I'm not gonna lie. I think the trade rumors got
Mm.
to his head. But for like the first 40 to 45 games of the season, he was relatively consistent. And even in games where the shot wasn't falling, he was contributing in other ways. And most importantly, he would limit his shot volume. So I do think that
Mm.
if he's bought in, he can contribute in a positive way to the Hawks. It's just that if you ask too much of him, which is kind of like the Hunter problem that you mentioned earlier, I think you're going to see those old tendencies start to come back.
Yeah, that's really insightful, and I think for us, I don't think we need Caris to do what we were asking Hunter to do, right? And that a lot of what we were asking DeAndre Hunter to do is be like, we need you to be the backup four. We need you to guard the biggest wing on the floor if Zachary Shane Dyson isn't on the floor, and we need you to be our go-to scorer off the bench. And a lot of the points you're making about the ball handling, the interior passing, the processing, that's really what we needed from that spot that DeAndre Hunter was occupying. And I think that Caris Levert comes in, and I've also heard from Cavs fans as well that he's improved on defense. So I definitely want to ask your thoughts on that. But when you look at some of the metrics that I put up on the screen, I mean, his playmaking stands out to me. Like he's in the 80th percentile in playmaking talent. When you look at the actual passing numbers, he's at 18.4 assist points per 100. He's near the top of the league in potential assists per 1 minute on the ball at 3.0. He's averaging over 7 assists per 100. And you compare that to DeAndre Hunter, who was averaging just 3 assists or so per 100. It's a huge change in terms of the way that the ball will be popping. But one thing that I have personally always had an issue with Caris Levert is like sometimes he can hijack an offense, right?
Mhm.
And I have seen him do it for multiple teams in multiple contexts. I haven't seen him do it a ton for Cleveland, but I was wondering like how you feel about that. Like I know that he can pass, I know that he is a great shot maker, but sometimes it feels like it's not always within the flow of the offense. Am I right on that, or do you think that he's gotten better at that?
You're right, and I can see both ways. In previous years, he used to be coming back to his old tendencies back when we had JB Bickerstaff as a coach, and we were
Mm,
in a lot more of a slow paced offense where he was kind of tasked to be a point guard.
mm,
So even though he is a great playmaker, you don't want him necessarily being like your primary playmaker because he doesn't really have the rim pressure that some other guards would have. So that's where like the tendencies can pop up, and then once that finishing like starts to creep in, and he's just missing layups, he'll go to his mid range, which hit or miss, and it's not really efficient, even if sometimes it can look pretty. But
mm,
this year, when with Kenny, he's kind of changed his shot profile. He hasn't taken many mid ranges at all. I don't know the exact shot volume, but just based off the eye test, he's taking a lot more catch and shoot threes. And when he is taking pull up threes, it's usually off pick and roll, so he's not really isoing that much.
mm,
So honestly, I wouldn't expect, especially with Quinn Snyder as a coach, who I know is like a pretty good offensive coach, and along with someone like Trey Young in the backcourt, if he's starting or not starting, because he's going to be Dyson, but if he's
right.
like staggers with Trey or he has some secondary ball handling next to him, I don't think you'll see as many tendencies. But when it does happen, it's going to be egregious, and you're going to notice it. Just the Pistons game was my example. I was just kind of Levert a little bit, just because I knew like he was part of the trade deals. But I love Levert. I don't want to get
Yeah.
that. I want to get that out of the way.
Yeah, so to your point, right, he's at the highest three-point frequency of his entire career. Outside of his rookie year where he didn't play a ton of minutes, he's taken 50% of his shots from three, shooting 41%. And if you look at the mid-range volume, last year he was taking 29% of his shots from mid-range. The year before prior, about 30%. This year is just 16. So I think that's great evidence that he sort of cleaned that up. The rim finishing isn't great, to your point as well. He's at 59%. For 6'6", I think he's kind of a not a skinny dude, but he's not super powerful. Do you think
Yeah,
that
man.
that's just? Do you think it's a shot selection thing? Do you think it's a strength thing, or what do you think it is with the finishing?
He really makes the first bump. He's kind of like a finesse finisher, so I would say
Mm,
that's the biggest reason.
mm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, the offense has been really good this season. He's taking more threes than ever. If you look at the net rating, of course not. When you play on a good team, your net rating is going to be pretty good. But he was positive in his on-off differential, which is tough to do as a bench player. You mentioned something I thought was interesting, right? Because I kind of envisioned Caris coming in, and he's not necessarily like the DeAndre Hunter replacement in terms of role, but more so like the bogey replacement. Like this is a guy who's going to come in, handle the ball a lot more, run some pick and roll, run some second side pick and roll. But you said that you think that he's at his best playing off someone as a secondary ball handler, like someone else is handling the ball. Do you think
Yes.
asking him to run the bench is asking too much of him?
Off the top of my head, I can't list the Hawks bench players, especially after the trade. It would have been, ironically,
That's
would have been Bogey.
Yeah, I can
But
tell you a couple of guys. Like the thing is with Jalen out, it's not a lot of secondary ball handling. Like it'd have to be Dyson. You could put Keaton Wallace or Pete Krejci out there. Like those guys can handle the ball as well, but they're not as adept at creating advantages like a Jalen or a Trey. You see what I'm saying? So it would be more so like I think V is like several steps below Ty Jerome. You know what I mean? Like I think Ty and Caris are like Ty's a legitimate like this is a backup point guard. He can facilitate. We don't necessarily have that.
let's see. I think my best answer would be if he has to be kind of like someone you go to like in certain stretches, or like you need a spark plug. He'll be nice, especially with the chemistry with Onyeka. Expect Onyeka to like, of course he's already with Trey, so I think you already are accustomed to great passing to the bigs, but expect that to kind of like pseudo maintain with Levert coming in. I think his efficiency will decrease. You know, he doesn't have as much spacing next to him. He's already kind of a bad finisher, so he's going to be relied more to be a shooter. I think he'll be kind of like a high volume. His efficiency will drop to like, I would say like 35, 36%. I think his fit matters a lot. And I don't know if, at least this year, if Atlanta has the pieces next to him. Now, when you guys get Jalen Johnson back, who has improved tremendously as a ball handler and playmaker, I think it's going to look really pretty for y'all. But right now, I'm not sure, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the numbers. You mentioned the interior passing. He's in the 94th percentile in rim assists. That's really great. His turnovers it's a little bit high, but you can see like he's also on the ball more than most players, so that definitely adds up. This 2-point percentage versus 3-point percentage is concerning. I will say that, especially because like he has never really been a high volume 3-point shooter in his career, and he's also never been this good from three. So like if the 3-point shooting drops, then the overall efficiency probably will. And like to your point too, he's not in as good of a context. I do want to ask you a little bit about the defense. I haven't had a ton of time to like sit down and watch these guys yet in their context, but the deflections is what stands out to me. So he's in the 87th percentile in deflections. If you create deflections and you can be scrappy, like you fit into the Hawks system, I've seen Cavs fans say that he's improved on that end. What's your take? Do you think he's improved? Do you think he's a product of a great defensive environment, or like what can we expect from him defensively?
I think by himself, he's already a pretty good defender, honestly. I like his point of attack defense. You can put him on ones, twos, and most threes. He's great at disturbing passing lanes based on like the deflections you said. I usually like when we put him on guys like, off the top of my head, Stephen Curry, Trey. I like when you have him on Trey Young rather than Okoro, because Okoro relies a lot on strength. So Trey gets a lot of his spatial creation, dribbling, ball handling, pace and space. Levert is kind of good for disturbing that. He is very like he does reach a lot, and the deflections do kind of like overrate his off-ball defense because he ball watches a lot and he does gamble a lot. So you're gonna see some possessions where like he reaches for the ball when it was never in play. And like as you don't want him when he's not a point of attack defender, in my opinion. But if you want him to be your main point of attack defender, or you want him to be on like a secondary best ball handler, I think he's a very good option.
Okay. Yeah, and for the Hawks, you know, with Dyson's on the floor, it's going to be Dyson against whoever. But there has been like, okay, who's going to take that second guy? You know, like if we play someone like y'all, for example, it's kind of tough to figure out someone else. I think that's some of the reason they got Terrence Mann, but knowing that Caris can step into that too is pretty, pretty interesting. Now I want to transfer over to Niang. Actually, no. Before I talk about Niang, I want to ask you this is what Quinn Snyder just said during the press conference, and I want you to let me know how accurate you think this is. he said that these are the traits of the newcomers that appeal to the Hawks. For Georges Niang, he said shooting and a sense of humor with competitiveness. And then for Caris Levert, he said creation for himself and others in defense. Does that check out to you?
Basically checks out, yeah. Defense is general, but if they're gonna use him how like most people imagine defense, which is just on ball defense, he
Mm-hmm.
hit it out the park.
Okay. Now I want to ask you a couple questions about Niang before we talk about Hunter and the Cavs system. Like Niang is just this Hawks team has been starved for shooting. I think I haven't checked the numbers as of late, but earlier in the season we had the biggest gap between we were getting outscored by 3 at historic rates. Like we've never had a team get outscored by threes in terms of points generated off threes per game like the Hawks were. Like we were getting blasted from the 3-point line, and we were making up for it by scoring in the paint. When Jalen Johnson goes down, we lost our biggest paint threat, right? And so
Yeah.
it's become really tough because we can still generate great threes, but guys aren't hitting them. We're one of the worst teams in the league at converting on open threes. And I think Niang, I said he plays fat boy basketball. The dude's a shooter, bro. Like he's also, I think he's actually a forward. Like he's actually a power forward size. Like maybe not vertical leap, but like he's a big dude. He's strong. Positionally, I think he can hold that down. When he played the 4, what did you think about the rebounding? And I know you probably paired him with like an Allen or a Mobley, so it's not a huge concern. But like, do you think he could play the 4? Like again, like next to, I mean, we have guys like Larry Nance, Clint Capella. I think him and Capella would be a really good pairing. If that's like the type of thing I'm thinking about.
Niang is, in my opinion, you can't put him at any other position other than the 4, and he's good at the 4 role. He's an amazing shooter. The 3-point percentage, like sometimes as a Cavs fan, it doesn't feel real when he shoots 40% because one game he'll shoot 75%, and another game he'll shoot 20%. So sometimes it doesn't feel real, but then we're kind of privileged because we have so many great shooters. So
Yep.
I don't want to act like like he's an amazing shooter. I want to preface that, and he's willing to take contested shots consistently, and he's hitting them consistently.
Hmm.
As for rebounding, if I'm gonna be blunt, he's probably the worst rebounding player relative to size in the league. He doesn't really have much of a vertical pop. He
Hmm.
fouls a lot when trying to box out, and he's not
Hmm.
really. He's and when we try to run our zone, and this is what Cavs fans mainly complain about the most. And the first Hawks game kind of proved it when we ran zone and Trey just picked us apart. Um, Niang wasn't on for the final stretch, but like earlier in the games, whenever Niang would try to scramble, he couldn't recover. So if someone got a pump fake on him, it was basically wraps.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect much from Niang in the front court. And it got to a point where even though we had Mobley and Allen staggering centers, whenever we would play teams like Houston and Boston and OKC, they would massively out rebound us as soon as Niang would get on the court. So
Hmm.
that's going to be a major concern.
Hmm. Yeah. So and here's the funny thing too. I'd say the same thing about DeAndre Hunter. But of course he's actually 6'8" and he's athletic enough to jump and get off the floor. But relative to his size, Hunter is not a great rebounder. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that Hawks fans are used to. So I don't think it'll be a huge thing. And it's also like, okay, well, it's Niang as opposed to like this is a 6'8" guy with a 7'2" wingspan, not getting a rebound. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But that's good to know because in my head, a lot of Hawks fans have like drawn the parallels to like Gallinari for us. So like during the 2021 playoff run, Gallinari was a really big piece of that because he could space the floor. He was physical. He wasn't a great defender in space by any means, but like he was physical enough to hold up against guys in the interior and stuff like that. Have you seen is there anything on defense you would say he's positive at? I would imagine like maybe in the post, but outside of that, like is there anything you would say he's positive at defensively?
This is a little bit of a hot take, but I don't really think he's an egregious on-ball defender because he uses
Mm,
physicality well. He kind of does that
mm,
fat boy basketball thing, and if you know, you know. When you
yep.
play perimeter defense, you give off just a little bit of space, so technically the offensive player can shoot whenever they want. But offensive
Mhm,
players' first mindset is to get to the rim because play that's an easy layup, or you can get playmaking opportunities rather than just threes. And against a lot of Niang's weaker matchups, it usually works. So I think Niang isn't an egregious on-ball defender. It's mainly his
mm,
off-ball defense that concerns me if we get to that.
yeah. And to your point, like scrambling or trying to zone up, trying to cover a lot of space when he's not on the ball. definitely makes sense. Looking at some of his defensive stats, like the contesting, nothing really jumps off the page, especially over the last 3 years. Like he's not really making a difference field goal percentage wise, but these contest stats are pretty high. And I think you guys in general do a good job at closing out the shooters, so that's probably a big reason why. And he's not super active, like in terms of deflections. You can see, I would classify him as an irritant though. Like I think he plays a style of basketball that really frustrates other fans and other players. So there is a value to that. Obviously it's not huge defensive value, but I think when you can be annoying to a player, it's pretty good. I think it again, like it's pretty simple with Niang. Like it's just about the shooting. Like we really badly needed a guy like this. And here's, for example, when you look at his spot up, this is his spot up play type. So these are on plays where he's shooting off the catch. This year, he's in the 88th percentile in possessions per game. The last 3 years, or really the last 5 or so years that he's qualified, he's been near the top 90th percentile. So he's in the top 10% of the league. He's in the top 50 in points over expectation. Like legitimate shooter, proven, over volume. It has been on a lot of great teams. And I know you probably know this. I know you do, but like he's been the winningest player in like the 2020. And
Yes.
so I worry. I think that like maybe down the line he could keep contributing wins. Maybe not in the Hawks scenario, but I think he's just been blessed by the scenario, of course. Like it's not like Niang's the one driving it. But I do think he does a lot of the positive things that good teams have, right? There's a reason he's been on the Sixers. There's a reason he had a role for Cleveland. Like for all the issues he has defensively, this type of shooting and this type of frame is valuable, and it will be a big help for the Hawks. So I'm excited to see what he can do. We were playing another big boy who wasn't doing anything for us offensively. So it's a nice little change of pace. But before now, I want to transfer over to DeAndre Hunter, who I honestly feel like you guys are going to have a lot of fun with him. He's also going to be very frustrating at times as well. You're gonna wonder, why is this guy 6'8"? Because he feels like he's 6'4". You'll see some of the rim finishing stuff, the rebounding stuff I mentioned as well. But I think from the Cavs perspective, right? I've been a big Dean Wade appreciator for a long time. And I just saw, let me make sure I pull up the actual numbers. I just saw this, but I'm pretty sure you guys are like drastically different when Dean Wade plays versus when he doesn't.
Yes. It's been all over Cavs Twitter.
All over. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to pull it up. You guys are 7-7 all time. In the 20 games you played against Boston, 7-7 when Dean Wade plays, 1-5 when he doesn't.
Wow, I did not know that one in particular.
Yeah, this tweet is from December 31st, so it may have changed since then. They have an 88-33 record with Dean Wade on the floor since Donovan Mitchell was on the team. They're 39-36 without him. That's a 60 win pace versus a 43 win pace. And they were at the time, this was the end of the year, the 31st. They were 22-1 with Dean Wade on the floor. Okay. Now here's the thing about Dean Wade. Is he the greatest wing ever? No. Right? I think you would agree too. But he's 6'8", size, he can space, he can rebound, he doesn't make mistakes. Right. And he was the only guy on the roster with that size and that skill set. And so I think, again, from y'all's perspective, okay, now we're getting another guy who's more physical or more gifted scorer with the ball in his hands, a proven spot-up shooter. And now we have, between him, Okoro, and Dean Wade, we have real size, real defenders, and real spacing at that position. So from my perspective, at least, this is going to be a really great thing for you guys, especially because DeAndre Hunter is pretty easily, like, he is the fifth starter. And the reason why that matters is because if he's anywhere above your fifth starter, a team's in trouble, which is why it was such a problem for us. And so I'll start with like the playmaking. He's just not a good playmaker. Like he just isn't. Like I actually don't even think he sees playmaking lanes at all. I will say though, he's been so much better in Quinn's system, like making quick decisions. And this is a big reason why he's been so good this season. Very early in his career, like he was prone to over dribbling. Oh my God, it was awful. You can really see that with like the ISO numbers or like the ball handling numbers or the handoff numbers. Like you can see like he was really bad, especially like last season. He was terrible. Like he's in the like the 16th percentile in terms of effectiveness. But in these other types of like low usage where he's not creating for himself, like he's super effective. So I think he'll be really good. What do you think the the rotation looks like now, because I feel like Dean Wade still has to play. So what do you think the rotation looks like in the regular season? What do you think it looks like in the playoffs?
Regular season, we're probably going to run a 10-man, maybe 11th man if we get our buy on Ben Simmons. I don't know if that's been announced yet or if it's going to be announced later tonight or even tomorrow, but that's
Mm-hmm.
been a huge rumor. I don't know if we'll get him for sure because there's other teams wanting him, but that changes things. But let's just assume there's no Ben Simmons for now. Dean Wade is 100% going to play in the regular season and playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very good role player. He's not like obviously the impact metrics kind of gas him, but it was
Yeah.
mainly because we didn't have the 3-and-D tall wings that other teams have, especially with two small guards and two at least. I won't say Mobley's not a non-shooter. He's definitely gotten a lot better, but he's
Mm-hmm.
still a below average shooter compared to most people at his position. So someone like Dean Wade, who's doesn't really like dribble much, is not really ball dominant at all, plays great defense, can dang near switch 1 through 5. I don't think you don't want him at your 5 full time, but I've seen him guard
Yeah.
fives for long stretches. Um, he's just a very good glue guy. So going back to DeAndre Hunter in the rotation, DeAndre Hunter I'm 90% sure he's starting, but I don't know if the Cavs are maybe like the first 5 to 10 games they make him come off the bench because that was his role in Atlanta, but he should
Mm-hmm.
start. Um, I'm glad we made this trade and for another reason, and it's because we get more Ty Jerome minutes. Me
Mm-hmm.
and Cavs fans have been complaining dang near every game. Why doesn't Jerome get more minutes? And it makes sense because Levert is another guard that needs minutes. Struz can be considered a guard. Same thing with Okoro. And now Jerome can get more than 18 minutes per game. And he is awesome. So I'm glad he's going to get like closer to like 22 to 23 minutes a game. He'll be our sixth man. I'll say like Dean Wade's our seventh man. Max Strus is our eighth, which I think that can change between Dean and Max. But anyway, back to the point. I think Okoro is going to be our ninth, which for a championship team, Okoro as your ninth man is really a privilege. I appreciate that. And then if I'm not missing anybody, I believe Sam Merrill for now is our 10th man, right? Yeah, I think Sam Merrill is our 10th man.
Yeah. So
And
I
then,
think, not to cut you off, but I was gonna say, like, when you look at DeAndre Hunter's role and where he's been at his best, it has been off the bench, because he can come in and be like, okay, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna get my buckets and not have to worry about like guarding the best player on the floor or doing whatever. And I think if you start him against certain teams, I don't think you're gonna see the best version of DeAndre Hunter, right? And that's because I think sometimes he can be overmatched defensively, and of course you have the Twin Towers back there to back him up. But like, for example, if you guys are playing Boston, I think the best, because it's the same thing with Caris Levert. Like, you don't want DeAndre Hunter off the ball either. So I'd much rather have him engaged at the point of attack. So I think you put one of DeAndre Hunter on Tatum, and you put Okoro or Dean Wade on Jaylen Brown, and you're set. Like, you can run one big, you can run double big, whatever it may be. But the one thing I think is really important about DeAndre Hunter is that he plays at the 3. He should not play at the 4. And I know that I saw you saying this, but I know that one thing you guys were worried about is like getting a backup big. Um,
yeah,
with Niang off the floor, do you think it's Dean Wade who's now the backup 4? Is that
yeah.
sort of how you're?
I want Dean Wade to get some small 4 minutes, but he's going to be mainly a backup 4. I still want a backup 5, and ironically, I don't think we need like a true 5, just someone who can come in if like Jared or Evan miss like 1 or 2 games, and
Hmm.
mainly be a 4. So kind of like a Ben Simmons in a way. Um,
Do you think y'all are getting Ben Simmons?
I'm not sure. I low-key think he's going to the Rockets. It's just
Hmm.
I feel like he fits the culture over there more than here, and he's gonna be. I feel like he's gonna be asked to do more in Houston and in Cleveland. So I think he's going to Houston. Hopefully, he becomes a Cav. I'm not the biggest Ben Simmons fan, but for a 10th or 11th man, he's a very good player, especially when we don't have to deal with the contract.
And I think a more dynamic 4 would be really interesting for you guys, like in terms of pushing the pace. Like, I feel like, I mean, you guys are playing Tristan Thompson. Like, it's not great.
Yeah.
But like I said, my point about Dre is, look at the difference in his effectiveness when he gets to play at his position, which is as a 3 and not the 4. Like, this season, he has been a disaster. His entire career, he's been worse at the 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he's had to play more minutes at the 4, it hasn't been great. Like, you can just see the differences in the effectiveness in these minutes. And the other thing, like I said, you will have to Probably expect a difference in the rebounding when he's on the floor versus off. So we'll take a quick look at that real quick. I think you guys, again, like this is why I think he's going to be so much better. It's just like you have a better context for it, right? Like there's so much size around him. There's other options for the wing. He's not relied on to create everything. I think it's going to make a huge difference. And I do want to ask you too, like, what position do you think Caris Levert is? Like, I'm kind of, he's played wing, he's played combo, he's played point. Like, where do you think he is? And where do you think he's at his best? He's at his best.
We played him at many different positions. I think he's best as a two. You get
Mm-hmm.
another point guard next to him that can be the primary playmaker, and then the three can be the guy who you put on bigger wings. I do have a question for you though.
What's up?
The Cavs run a lot of zone, and we mainly run a lot of zone to combat like teams mismatch hunting on Garland and Mitchell. I was wondering with Hunter at the three, if that kind of boosts our zone, and with his length, if his rebounding deficiencies are going to be highlighted in the zone.
So great question. I think that Hunter has actually been a little bit better in zone scenarios. So I can actually show you the zone that we played against the Pacers. So we played a matchup zone. DeAndre Hunter was on the court for a lot of those minutes, and I think that he's gotten better in terms of communicating. I still think he has a lot of work to do. Like, and it's kind of crazy. Like at age 28, he came out of college as a plus defender. I saw. Did you see what Ty Jerome said on DeAndre Hunter's farewell post?
Yeah, I saw like 1 or 2 hours before this meeting, but yeah, I saw it. It was funny. I didn't expect that because I saw like by Ty Jerome. I thought it was gonna be like welcome to Cleveland or something, and then he was like he's clowning, so it was funny.
Yeah,
So
Ty told him to come play defense, right? And I think Hunter can't be the guy that compromises the infrastructure. And I don't necessarily think he will be, but he will have moments that will frustrate you, right? So here's the Hawks zone. We're playing a 3-2 zone. It's a 3-2 shell, but it's really a matchup zone. So you're gonna, if you look at DeAndre Hunter here at the bottom, he's a low man. He's gonna communicate here. He's telling, okay, oh, actually, he's supposed to communicate here. So I'll show you the difference, right? As TJ is cutting through, there's no communication to Larry Nance here, right? Like Dre, it's hard to tell if he's saying anything. What the Hawks want to aim to do with this zone is like all zones in general, but like keep the ball out the middle, right? So the way the Hawks, they're very aggressive tagging the roller here. So DeAndre Hunter is picking up Thomas Bryant to keep the ball from going to the middle. Garrison Matthews says, okay, go get Andrew Nembhard. He's cutting through. I'll get Thomas Bryant. So it's a very flexible zone. And then here, Andrew Nembhard is creeping up. DeAndre Hunter has lost eyes on him, right? He has no idea where Andrew Nembhard is. He's kind of guarding nobody as everyone else is they've sort of broken out into their matchups. And then he's stepping up. And then Nembhard, who again, he's supposed to let Larry Nance know you need to pay attention to him. He's able to drop. He actually steps out or travels here, right? So I think there's a little bit left to be desired. And here's an example. I think it was this one right here. So here's an example with Don Barlow and Garrison Matthews on this side. So Barlow's paying attention. Okay, he points out, okay, Garrison Matthews, you get Pascal Siakam. Then he's going to point. He's going to step up to the middle. They're talking. I think zone takes a lot of communication. And one thing that DeAndre Hunter isn't is like a super communicative guy or super emotive guy. And I think that sometimes is a detriment because you just have to be able to talk and let your teammates know what's going on. I think I have one more example, but he does do it sometimes. So like here it is right here. He's like, okay, well, we got two guys on this side. Trey, pay attention. Here comes Andrew Nembhard. He's like, okay, I got him. Onyeka, pull out to Andrew Nembhard. I got your man. Boom. And then he bumps off the Pascal Siakam, and they end up making the shot. So I'm not saying he's incapable, but he can sometimes be spacey. And he can sometimes, somewhat similar to Caris Levert, make some gambles, but it'll be the type of gambles where like he leaves someone open and he's not a great guy like shooting the gap or like actually getting steals. So it's kind of like just floating around. So long-winded answer. I think he can do it. I don't think he'll be such a problem that you won't be able to run the zone with him on the floor. But there will be moments. I feel like there will be moments where he may be a little confused or not paying as much attention. The Hawks last year, we set a record for the most points allowed off cuts. A lot of it was DeAndre Hunter's fault. It's Sadiq Bey's fault for the backdoor cuts. So I would say look out for that. Again, I think you guys have the infrastructure to cover up those mistakes. And at the very least, he's a big body that can handle, guys cutting into him or protecting the rim. So I still think it'll work, though. I still think it really will work. I think you guys got better. I like you guys against Boston a lot more than I did, just because of the optionality, the versatility. I still think the way Boston has played, I'm starting to feel like they're a little bit vulnerable. I've said at the beginning of the season, I think I am worried about the bigs, especially with Al Horford declining, but I think you guys have a shot. And I feel better than I did pre the deadline. If you got Cam Johnson, I think it'd be a different story.
Sure.
But so how do you feel this has raised the Cavs ceiling?
I think our floor, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think our floor got that much higher. I think it's pretty much the same. But I feel like
Mhm.
our ceiling got a lot higher. And the reason why I think our ceiling got a lot higher is because let's talk about the defense first, just because that's the things that stand out. Even though honestly our defense isn't really bad against those good teams.
Yeah.
Whenever Porzingis, whenever we run our zone or whenever like the Celtics are mismatch hunting, especially Porzingis, having Hunter there to switch rather than someone like Garland or Mitchell is really key, or even
Mhm.
someone like Strus. Um,
Mhm.
Hunter might not necessarily have the craziest defensive instincts, but Porzingis just wants to shoot over most people. He doesn't really like. I'm
Yeah,
not
he
saying he
doesn't
doesn't have
back his
any
gun.
bag, but he mainly just shoots over people. Let's be honest. So having like
Yeah.
someone with Hunter who has like a 7'2" wingspan is going to be huge. And then on
Mhm.
offense, and what I really like about Hunter's game is that not only is he a good 3-point shooter above the break, which we have a lot of corner shooters, but not really a lot of above the break shooters other than our two guards. He has a mid range pull up. So it's
Yeah.
I don't know the efficiency on that necessarily, but when I watch other teams play, when I watch these other wings, especially like when I watched last night against the Celtics, Najee Marshall was just hitting the most crazy shots. Like Najee
Mhm.
Marshall's hitting these shots, and then I kind of realized to myself, wings can kind of hit these very contested shots, at least to the people watching, but to them, this is an open shot. Like a Najee
Yeah.
Marshall floater isn't contested like a Max Strus floater or a Darius Garland floater.
Mhm.
So like someone like DeAndre Hunter, who if the defense is closing out, I already talked about it before the show, but DeAndre Hunter would be the worst driving kick guy on the team by percentage wise. But that's not necessarily a weakness because he plays with he plays with Trey Young, and Trey Young is a guy who's going to get you open looks, so he doesn't really have much of incentive to drive and kick. Point is, he can go to that mid range whenever a defense hard closes out, which none of our other guys can really do that. We would have to like reset the possession and over rely on the guards.
Mhm.
I really like him as an off ball option. I like him as a shooter. I know he's not the greatest finisher, but he's an improvement over some of the guys that we had, like Niang and Levert. And I like him against those bigger wings like Jason Tatum, Luca. I don't think he'll shut them down, but if you're running like traditional drop coverage, I like him with like Mobley and Allen hanging back. As we said before, he does have his off ball issues, and I do have concerns with him running his own. But
Mhm.
I think he fits the bare minimums, and he exceeds at the bare minimums. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, definitely makes sense. And I do want to tell you though, the screen navigation is pretty bad. Um,
Mhm.
he's not very good at getting skinny over a screen or getting or sliding over. He's not. And then the other thing too, he can get very tripped up on like what coverage is best. Like for example, against the Spurs, I talked about it on the last podcast I had with a Spurs fan. He blitzed for no reason, and not only did he blitz, he didn't blitz the right way, and he didn't commit to it. So he basically set a pick on Dyson and then left Wemby wide open. So if we look at the screen navigation numbers, which I think are um, down here, like I don't know how he got an A minus. I will say I think he probably hasn't gotten screened as much this year because he isn't guarding guys as much like on the ball.
Mhm.
But he's not a bad like I would never say he's a bad defender, and I'm not trying to trash him because we traded him. I think he has his weaknesses, like every defender does. I think he's at his best, like you said, against big wings who play with strength. If he has to contain someone who's quicker than him, it can be tough because he doesn't use his length very well. If he has to go over a ton of ball screens, that can be a little bit tough as well. But if you let him go against a guy like Brandon Ingram, Luca, a LeBron, um, Julius Randle. Well, Julius Randle's a little bit stronger, but like guys who like will pound the air out the ball. I think that's where he's at his best, and he can really be an impact player when you're doing that. And then, of course, you talk about some of the versatility. So here's what these are the types of positions he's defended this season. He is best, I think. Again, like you can see this reflected here. Like he's best against power forwards. He also has guarded a little bit of shooting guards, but this is a pretty good defensive profile in terms of being able to switch 1 through 4 ish. I wouldn't trust him on a 5, but you can switch him 1 through 4. And then one more thing before we wrap up, you mentioned the Garland switching against Jason Tatum and the Celtics, and in the matchups you guys have had, Garland has been really good at this. I think
He has, yeah.
he's been really good. But if you look who's on the floor, Okoro is like the main defensive guy in this lineup. And Tatum, sometimes to his detriment, he's not a great rim finisher, right? So you can kind of get away with this at times. But like if this is a Kristaps Porzingis, Kristaps is going to catch and he's going to face up, he's going to shoot. And that 7'2" wingspan is going to give DeAndre Hunter a lot of help there. The great thing that the Hawks have done, a really good thing this season, is sort of scramming out. Now, it's not always with DeAndre Hunter, but what they'll do is, let's say someone's trying to force a switch on the Trey. Trey will concede the switch and then sprint away, and then one of the Hawks will rotate over. So we'll see. Dre has done it. Jalen has done it. Dyson has done it. Veit has done it. And so I think those instincts as well, to where like DeAndre Hunter is used to sort of accommodating guys who need some help defensively, I think that can help as well. I'm really excited to see what you guys do this season. I don't know if you saw the tweets I made during the offseason, but I said, like, you guys are going to scratch 50 wins. And I said that I believe in Garland's bounce back season. So I'm happy to take that victory lap. You guys are, I do believe right now, if you had to guess, like, what do you think your chances are against Boston? Because honestly, like, I view you and Boston as like the two different tiers, like just very different tiers, but like outside of, like, above the rest of the East, it's you and Boston. Where do you think your chances are against Boston now that you have Hunter? Now that you have like a more defined rotation?
Assuming everybody's healthy, I do like our chances. I still think Boston is the favorite, mainly because not only do they have championship experience, and they have a lot of glue guys like Derek White and Drew Holiday who can be really annoying at times. They are an exceptionally amazing road team, like one of the best road teams. Honestly, checking the winning percentage this year, last year, and then like the playoffs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure they have one of the best road records, like, out of most teams ever, honestly. So
Yep.
I am a little bit concerned even with home court. But what I will say is I'm not expecting any of the games to be a blowout. I'm not expecting any big weaknesses to be capitalized off. If we do lose to Boston, I think it would just be pure talent. And I am much better losing off to talent or losing off to like just great tough shots or like consistent like playmaking where like most teams would just fail at that, rather than having an obvious weakness going by the deadline and just not doing anything about it. So if I would make a prediction, I would say Celtics in 7. I think it'd be a really good and a really close series. I think what it would take for the Cavs to win is for Evan Mobley to have a phenomenal series, which with Kristaps, the past 2 games, he has been kind of rough. So that's where my reservation is, because I love Mobley. I think he's one of the best players in the league. He's been like at the top 25, top 20 level this year. But I need to see how he does against those lengthier guys, and I need to see him put his chest into guys. And then Garland's also had his struggles with Boston. But Mitchell has been good. I think Allen will have a good series. I think our bench will be good, especially with home court advantage. So it's just nitpicking, honestly, at this point. And you much rather have that feeling rather than, oh, we have a big rebounding issue or we don't have a wing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Honestly, can't wait for the playoffs this season. I don't remember the last time the finals felt this open. Like last year, I felt good about Boston. 23, I felt good about Denver once I saw them in the playoffs. I think the last time I really felt like this was maybe 2021. But I think we're due for a beautiful playoff matchup. I really hope we get you guys versus Cleveland, and if not, I do hope you get to get your lick back against New York, because that would, I'm not saying I hate on the Knicks in particular, but I do think you guys should have won that series. So wait, y'all won that series, right? Or did they win?
I don't want to talk about it, so that should give you an answer. We lost it. We lost it in 5.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I really feel like you guys deserve to get your lick back. I would love to see that matchup, and then to get a conference finals matchup with Boston, that would be perfect. So yeah, I appreciate you so much for taking the time, man. Let the people know where they can find you.
No problem, man. I used to have a TikTok, but I kind of shut it down. But other than that, I have my Twitter. Obviously, Precision 80 is my Twitter. I'm not really like a self promoter like that, so you don't gotta follow me. But just know I'm here if you're ever bored and you just want to see me rainbow about whatever. Like I tweet about literally anything, including the Cavs. And then recently, I've had a YouTube channel. I just upload any type of Cavs content on there. Mo Williams highlights, Junis Ogauskas highlights, Garland highlights, Mitchell. Any Cavs player, I'm trying to
Big C
find.
Holly.
Yeah, I'm scrambling, man. I'm trying to find like the oldest Cavs players, even someone like Mark Price, Brad Daugherty. Obviously, like school is gonna make that tough, and I just got a job, so I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
gonna upload more than like one time a month. But if you're ever curious and you just want to watch any random Cavs highlights, I try my best to find the best ones. So that is something I am proud of.
yeah, he has the best Garland mixtape on YouTube, so definitely tap in if you want to see that. I appreciate you so much again for taking your time. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll definitely see if I can get you back on for our last matchup. I think we play you guys one more time, and then in terms of the other Hawks transactions, I will be speaking with a Clippers fan some point over the weekend about Terrence Mann and the now Wade Bones Highland. But y'all be safe. Appreciate y'all tapping in. See you in the next one.
See you on the next one.